Hey everyone, Scott here. Well, guess what? We're back at her one more time with Space Engineers. This time we're retrofitting. I did a bunch of mods, Spotlight last week that I showed a bunch of you guys and I left the video up. Now we're actually going to start to apply those to my regular game. And as you can see here, I'm going to start to retrofit my utility ships, and I'm trying to add a little more functionality. I'm trying to, basically I was testing out an idea if I could use a piston as a grab boot, but as you can see here, because of the proximity to the grinders, that didn't work. But you can see also on here I've got some armor thrusters on it now. There's a piston on the front and things like that. We'll get into that right now. And one other thing we've kind of decided that we enjoy doing is salvaging a great deal. We've been spending some time learning how to pick up some of these salvaging ships that show up when you use the cargo ships option in the game menus. This one here is a business shipment, I believe. And it's basically just, large reactors, some solar panels, and some cargo containers. A bit of metal, some thrusters. I mean, it's good stuff. We can use it. And we've also, just with the guys on the server now, we've added one more, this guy by the name of Alvin. And we've kind of sat down and talked about what we want to do. And since the Sevastopol worked great as a home ship, but it still didn't quite meet our needs, just with the amount of production that we were getting into, we decided we were going to build a station. And this was Raven's baby. He wanted to build it, so we all said sure, we can support him. First thing we did was start by building 3 of the azimuth large cargo containers, which we've been dubbing silos, to offload all of the material that we had on the Sevastopol into the station so that I could move the Sevastopol away, make it a station, and start retrofitting it. But at the time we were doing this, the Sevastopol was so full of stuff. Almost all of the cargo containers that we had were full of either raw material, ingots, or components. So I needed to offload that. Now, unfortunately, the vanilla large containers, for their size, are not that efficient with space, I guess. Like, if you take 27 small stock containers and put them in the same space, you actually end up with more cargo capacity. I did not know that when I was building it, so be it. But with these azimuth large cargo containers, they hold 17 times almost, probably 16 or 15 times as much cargo as a large cargo container. So for their space, they're actually quite efficient, if you want to talk about it in those terms. So we started with 3, and just to keep it simple, we've dubbed one is for ingots, one is for raw ore, and one is for components. And we also started using the inventory sorting system mod, which I will include in a link in this video, which is actually a really handy little mod that will auto store components based upon what they are in certain inventories. Plus it also allows you to exempt and or do other things with it. And although I'm no expert, because that actually was grabbed by Drayden, he sort of latched onto that mod as soon as he's seen it, he was able to streamline his mining operations a lot easier, make them a lot easier for himself, and save some time. It was easier to discard useless stone and things like that with it. So as you can see here right now, I've got a piston on the front of my scalpel ship. I found that to be very useful. That was hence the name for the scalpel, was because I could get the nose into small areas with the configurations it's in right now, and it became very useful for welding up tight areas. And just with the addition of mods, the piston mod by Nalia I think is how it's pronounced, excuse me if I'm wrong, but I was able to increase upon that functionality, so because now I have a wide piston for a small ship, which allows it to use the wide doors. And just as we continue on with the station here, the next thing after storage was refinement. So we started using refineries, stock ones. We've added a couple of refining mods, specifically from Hex. The rock crusher, if you can see that rectangular device beside the reactor, that I'm going to be putting my nose on here right away. Some of these don't have survival models, so they look like they're complete even though they're not, but that's fine. And that's just a basic rock crusher, which we can use for gravel. A specialized one, it won't pull any other raw material or process it in any way. We're also going to be adding uranium centrifuges here shortly, which are also made by Hex, another specialty refinery that only deals with uranium. And since uranium is kind of the gasoline of space engineers, you kind of need a good supply of it. You may have noticed as well on the scalpel that I've got these 2 green boxes, or they're lined in green on the outside. Those are azimuth batteries. We've started using battery power to power some of our small ships rather than just putting all these reactors on them, so that we can basically try to conserve uranium a little bit, I guess. Not that we really need to, because there's a significant amount of it that we've already got, and we've still got several asteroids, because the world that we're working in has 16 asteroids in it. So we won't run out anytime soon, but part of Raven's desires for the station was to complete a large solar array that would power most of it at some point. So we decided to start using some battery power more extensively to, again, just be conservative. There's no real other reason for it. I mean, we can always get more uranium if I have to place more asteroids or something like that, but if we're playing this as a survival, part of the logic is, you know, just because we've got an abundant amount of it doesn't mean we should waste it. At least that's where I stand. Some of these guys on here just grind up. And here's Drayden's mining operation. He's been working on this drill and getting his skiff bigger. It's working pretty good. I mean, not a lot of issues with it. When we started using the advanced rotors to create a kind of dual spinning drill, it did help to counterbalance a bit. It didn't come without its share of problems, because it did have some issues with lag and you know, just issues with that rotors were having in general at the time we recorded this. But it worked fairly well, and it worked really good. And as you can see here, it's allowed him to kind of chew up asteroids pretty efficiently and pretty safely. I mean, he doesn't really bounce around in them anymore. We've got a couple of different variations of this drill now. He's definitely perfecting it, as I guess you could say. So back at the station here, we're working on assemblers now. We're going to do, I think, 7 of them in here. We're going to have 1 master and 6 slaves. Just for the record, this, if you're into computers, it's a reference to hard drives. When you slave something, 1 is the master, 1 is the slave situation when you're cabling up hard drives in computers. And all that does is really tell the computer which one is the one you boot off of. In this case, the assemblers, the master is the one that determines what we build, and the slaves just assist it. They just contribute their assembling capacity to the master's queue. So the next step after this is, once we make this station self-autonomous, it still needs power and things like that, but at least enough power to run on its own. The next step is to repurpose the Sevastopol. Now, as a home ship and a refining ship, it worked great. I mentioned this before, but we've decided we're just going to change roles. We do generally enjoy chasing down those cargo ships that you see showing up on survival games. So we've decided, or as a group, that I'm going to repurpose the Sevastopol into a large salvage vessel with the capacity to capture and consume hulks of ships in a relatively high rate of speed, basically. I'm not exactly sure at this point exactly how I'm going to make that happen, but nevertheless, I do want to do this. I also want to make the Sevastopol be able to carry ships in order to actually assist with this job. So the first job I'm going to be, now that we've moved away, we've got the station self-sustaining. I'm going to grind up the front of the ship, because that's where most of the bulk is. It's where all the refineries were, where a lot of the cargo capacity was, and a few other things, like there was a a reactor in there as well that probably don't need. So we're going to cut the nose open, we're going to get in there, and I'm just going to salvage the insides. There's a fair amount of material in here. I had to make sure my scalpel was pretty much empty before I started, because not this last patch, but a few patches ago, the game reduced the capacity of grinders themselves, so I had to make sure I had enough space in the ship to cover the entire consumption of materials. And since this is a lot of heavy armor and a lot of refineries, you really there really was a lot of material in the front that's going to have to be addressed. Now, as I was working away here on the fighter section, which is going to be the new nose of the ship, is going to be kind of a launch bay for fighters, it became apparent that I was going to have to come up with an interesting launch and or recovery system, because I did not want to have a long runway run down the center bottom of the ship. And the reason for that was I was going to use the tail for the salvaging mechanisms, and that was to be determined later. So for this, the first thing I was going to do is hollow it out, take out the bottom layer of the vessel. From there, we will start working on a couple of different ideas. Now, because this is survival, it does take more time to sometimes flesh out some of these ideas. And it does take more time to construct them. And, you know, there is a certain logic to doing it in creative, but I just kind of went straight for survival just because I had everything here. Now, if any of you are familiar with a game called Crimson Skies, which was published by Microsoft many years ago, I don't exactly have an exact date, but they did one for the PC way back when, and then they did another one for, I think it was Xbox. Neither one of them did that well, for various reasons, mostly in my opinion due to bug problems. But it did have an interesting concept, because it was kind of an alternate universe, World War sort of II, or, you know, different take on aviation based around, say, the 30s and 40s when they were still flying prop planes. Now, you may be asking, well, how is this relevant to space engineers? And I'm like, because in that alternate reality game, they, instead of using aircraft carriers that were based on the ocean, fighters in that game were dropped from Zeppelins. And even though the game wasn't that great, that concept kind of interested me. Basically, what it would do is the Zeppelin would have a carrier platform underneath the balloon that would basically just have a series of hooks. And when they launched a fighter, the Zeppelin had to be a certain height, because what it would do is it would nosedive the plane down and release it. And then that's how it would get velocity initially until it gained enough speed that it could control itself on its own. That actually worked kind of well, and I was going to use a similar idea with space engineers. This is the first prototype of the fighter that I'm going to be putting into the Sevastopol. I just kind of did a quick walk around of it just to give you a quick view. The fighter will change, and potentially what will happen is some of my buddies are going to build their own fighters as long as they fit in the base. Now, this was the Sao Paulo. It got redone because I had a few issues with the original design, especially with the gravity drive. It was pulling funny, and that was because of the landing gears and things. I also decided to expand upon the Sao Paulo's mission profile a bit too. This is a combat support ship. I'm not sure if it would be considered a frigate or a corvette or anything, but it's basically a large ship build designed to be small, maneuverable, and aggressive. And the other function it would provide is stability for our captured vessels. Occasionally, if we get a hulk that's been blown out and it's lost its reactors, or it's lost some sort of its propulsion somehow, I can latch this ship onto it and arrest the velocity and bring it home. That was the plan, because a couple of the smaller fighters just didn't have the mass to really do that. Whenever we tried it, it either just kind of went horribly wrong, or something blew up, or, you know, general things that happen in space engineers that tend to cause you to lose stuff. So what I'm using on the back here now is I'm actually building these flat docking plates, or maglock plates. They're from another mod. Mod escapes me right now as to the mod maker, but I will post in the comments the mods that I'm using. It will be there. They work just like landing gears, but they're just basically flat planes about as thick as a catwalk. And I'm just welding them up here. They cost a great deal of material to make, considering how large they are. So that's good in terms of balancing. They also, but because of, you know, they're small, they're slim profile, they are very, very useful for any type of grabbing mechanism, where you don't have to worry about a huge landing gear or anything like that potentially causing its own issues on top of what you're trying to do. So this thing will basically latch onto ships. It will use its engines to arrest them, or to arrest their velocity. Arrest them, cop. Oh yeah. See what I did there? Anyway, so we're just building it up here. Now we're moving it. I gave it a bit of a paint job here. This was the second iteration of the Sao Paulo. It does get upgraded again at some point, because some of the mission profile is great, but it needed a little bit more. And like anything in space engineers, especially if you're serious about it, you're going to spend a lot of time designing an idea and then working it through, coming up with a solution, and then finding out there's a better solution and upgrading to that, and then, you know, tweaking it further. That's just the way these games are, and that's what really I find most enjoyable about them. Right now I'm just putting a merge block on it so I can lock it to a ship. This will also be carried by the Sevastopol as an auxiliary craft. We'll see. It depends. I might need more pilots to help me fly this stuff. taking applications. Just contact me. Anyway, moving forward here, yeah, you can see this is the first or the second, the Mark II. It works. It's got a rocket launcher in the front, 2 Gatling guns on the side, and a little bit of thrust. And it mostly relies on its gravity drive for speed. And this is Albion's miner he's building. We're just additions to our fleet because we only have one dedicated miner right now, and we'd probably be a good idea to have a little redundancy in case we needed it. Then this is the first sort of size test of the Sevastopol's hangar. As you can see here, I'm using rotors to develop the hangar bay doors, and then I switch that idea and then I switch it back because I was having a little bit of a technical nightmare trying to get this bomb bay to work sort of the way I wanted it to. There was several issues, and a lot of that had to do with rotor displacements and piston displacements and issues with rotors and or pistons, which is a known problem, which is being worked on. I have no doubt at some point it'll be fixed. Nevertheless, and I have no doubt at some point I'm going to be redoing this again and again just to try to come up with a better idea. I decided to scrap the rotor idea and go with a drop piston door to see if that would work just as well. So I played around with that for a fair bit. I spent a lot of time just trying to get this to work. As you can see, this is the first iteration of the drop bay doors. Now, some of you might have been familiar with the old piston merge block trick to merge 4 pistons into one ship so they work together rather than just having one piston and having it kind of unstable. So to do that, I seen it done in creative several times. There's a couple of videos out there. Aaron from Last Stand Gamers, I'll put a link in his channel, does this as well in creative. But I will try this in survival. It's a little bit of a different beast in survival. And what I did was I started by welding up the merge blocks and then putting a station where the platform is going to be, and then just adding more merge blocks, and then I was going to use the ship to actually push it in, because with survival it's not quite as straightforward as it is in creative. So I'm just going to weld all these up here, or just the merge blocks, mind you. And I do go through a couple of attempts, and there's some interesting things that happen as a result. I'm not going to spoil the surprise. So then I just put a little bit of a platform in here. Then I'm going to move my scalpel ship onto it to just mag lock and hold it. And then I'm going to lower the pistons at 4 at once to try to make this work. So just roll it, bring her in, land her on the platform. Try to get it just stable enough that it's, you know, it's not going to go anywhere. As I can see, I left the welder on, so it's kind of unnecessary. But I decided to straighten out a bit here. Alright, park it, mag lock, turn off the welder because I don't really need it at this point because this platform is going to get rebuilt anyway. And I have to turn this into a ship, so to do that I need a keypad, which I just quickly whip one on it just anywhere, just to turn it into a ship so that it works. And convert to ship. Now I'm going to attempt to merge all 4 pistons together at the same time. Let's see what happens. Now, for the record, this actually worked a little bit better than I had originally thought. However, it didn't work perfectly. When you're dealing in survival mode here, it's a little bit different. Now, I tried to do all 4 at once. As you can see, 3 connected, 1 didn't. And that created a problem. So this isn't going to work. As you can see, I can't connect the top to the bottom, and but I can connect the others to the system as it is. So, next step, I try to take off the 1 piston that's a problem, pull it back, and remerge. I attempted to fiddle around with this for a while, but it didn't work out the way I'd hoped. And as such, it ended up actually creating more problems. I had to start over. Nevertheless, this still some work to be done. I can get this sorted out. Messed around with this for a while, actually. Again, just attempting to use the different merge blocks to try to get them to reconnect or re-see each other, but all I ended up doing was separating the other ones. Didn't quite work the way I'd hoped. Tried pulling this one back to see if I could get it to do its particular one off and on, but still no luck. Tried a couple more things, still didn't work. Okay, so next attempt, I ended up grinding this out to recreate it. I put the keypads on the pistons themselves just to help me kind of identify what everything was, and that sort of played with it a bit. Didn't quite work out the way I'd hoped. As you can see here, still just trying to play around with the merge block just to see if I can figure something out to make this work. Still no luck. I focused a lot of attention on this particularly because this was going to be a bit of an issue, and you know, survival wise it's kind of important if you're like me and want to do a survival game. So my second attempt, I decided to try something a little different. I basically decided I was going to pull up on the block that I created with my ship to see what was going to happen. So just carefully trying to pull it up. Got to try to keep it as straight as I possibly can. Might have helped if I'd actually used the center of mass. So just trying. As you can see, that went horribly wrong. At this point, yeah, I lost a couple of grinders. I lost, I think, my gyroscopes. And yeah, just for some reason, I just could not get it stabilized. Still had the piece. There wasn't a lot of material in it. I was screaming for assistance at this point, and trying to figure it out, and Raven comes over to give me a hand to see what had happened, because everybody heard that explosion. Couldn't resist. So anyways, just trying to figure out why in the world my gyroscopes aren't working. Trying to turn them up. I can't turn anything on. It doesn't seem like anything's stabilizing, and I don't understand why. Anyway, this went horribly wrong. Just plain and simple. Do not attempt that. Did not work. Still, it was fun, and it was amusing. So we finally get her all stabilized and figure out what's going on, and Raven's just helping me consume what's left of the platform to put her back into storage so we can use it for something else. Anyway, all's well that ends all right. You learned something new. I needed to retrofit the scalpel anyway. Give it a little bit of an update. It was all good. Now this didn't deter me. I mean, truthfully, explosions like that happen all the time, regardless of comic embellishment. And yeah, just kind of gotta get used to it playing this game. You'll try and fail, and stuff will blow up, and it's all fun and good in the end. So what that little lesson taught me was, I need a bigger ship, because the scalpel wasn't designed very well for moving things. It only had the landing feet on it just to lock it down to a surface if I ever needed to. So the next project was to build a vehicle that would be designed to do that particular job. So we start working on a push-pull tuggy vehicle. Obviously I need certain parts to work here. For some reason I lost my tools, so I have to go get some more, and we'll get back to it. So just working away here, trying to get all the parts here. All this vehicle is going to be is a battery-powered sort of stabilization, tug, recovery sort of vehicle that I'm working on. It ends up getting named Tugger for obvious reasons. It's very simple. We wanted to again kind of run with it on battery power, just on the sake that we've been having some good luck with that. Don't really need a huge amount of reaction, therefore you don't need to put a huge amount of investment in fuel in it. So that was the road we took. It does have one small reactor in it, but that's only fires up if there's an emergency and all the battery powers are consumed. It's got three azimuth batteries for the large size ships in there, which when using under standard loads can last, I think it lasts like 8 hours, so of full time, which is more than enough, more than viable. Making more adjustments and just kind of working forward here again, skipping ahead to the point where I'm welding her up. I'm using azimuth thrusters on this just because of their size profile makes them very easy to locate and place, and you know, they're not bad. They are more expensive in terms of parts when you compare them directly to standard thrusters, but I don't know, and they got an interesting look to them too. And again, just kind of continuing on, Just going with a very simple sort of push-pull design. Very, very straightforward. There'll be a connecting port on the bottom, so it has a little bit of inventory storage, but not much. Again, it's mostly just there to accommodate putting a few tools or parts in if the requirement is there. So I just kind of building a ship up here. One thing I've noticed about space engineers, which I actually like, it's kind of an interesting little thing, is you're working away, you have an idea, you build something, you realize, hey, you have a problem to solve. Now I need a ship to build that or fix that problem. It always seems like the ways. First thing you do, you build a utility ship that grinds and welds. Why? Because grinding and welding by hand is tedious and slow. Plus with all the parts in your inventory space. That's kind of cool. And then you build a utility ship that speeds up your process, that makes it even better. You build a bigger ship to do another job. You get a huge miner that does a lot of work in a short period of time or consumes a lot of material for refinement in a short period of time. And you just keep building and building and building. And what it's kind of turning into on our survivor game is a great deal of ships. A lot of specialized little ships. It's sometimes hard to do multi-role or multitask ships, I find. But that's okay. I mean, I don't mind having a huge fleet of ships that only see service every little once in a while. It gives you something to distract you from the big projects, which can get a little bit daunting, like the Sevastopol that I was working on there. This ship will help me do the piston trick. But as you can see, it's not quite as simple as, you know, I was hoping it was going to be. And, you know, just takes time and effort, and you got to problem solve, right? It's a really good game if you're into problem solving like I am. So it won't be too much more. I'll get this sucker done. I'm going to use it to stabilize that platform that I'm trying to attach to the Sevastopol. But this ship turns out to be quite a bit more useful in a few other situations, i.e., later when a buddy of mine is on, I start following him around in his fighter, and I can use it to recover wrecks after they've been completely disabled. Worked really well. Now this is another example. This is Albin here is making his little welding drone. This is going to be his utility ship. He's not going for a big piloted dual-seater. He went for a little small remote control welder drone, which actually looks kind of cute and fluffy. Anyway, as you can see here, and yeah, it was kind of neat. It was we hadn't done a lot of work with remote control drones, but Albin had obviously had a little bit of experience with it. Before we knew it, he was we had this little putt-putt that was following us around. I think he named it Mario. And it was kind of useful because he came up with a neat idea. He was running his mining ship that he was building, and then, you know, when he'd come out of an asteroid, he'd have the little mining drone attached to it. When he'd come out of an asteroid, he'd release the mining drone, and from the remote, he would just fix his ship, and then when he's done, he'd put the drone back on his miner and keep moving. Actually, a clever little idea. I really liked it. I will probably pilfer said idea for something else later down the road. Anyway, as you can see here, I'm just putting the final touches on it to get it going here. I ended up putting just one little connector on it because, again, I was going to charge this thing off of the station's power. I'm hoping at some point in the near future Raven will finish the huge solar array because he's got a large battery bank in the ship in the station as well. And then we can get off of our dependency of uranium to a certain degree. Isn't that the goal? Turns out that it's kind of cool, actually. I've been doing a lot of research personally on alternative energy sources and green power for my home. And I've come up with a couple of cool things and a couple of interesting sort of ideas that I want to explore, but I'll get more into that later. So just finishing up this, and I found out, oh, I forgot to weld up one thruster. So I get out and try to find out where it was. I think it turns out it was on the top. Go to weld it, missing some parts, and I was going to run grab them, but then Raven was like, hey, I'm right here, I'll do it. So he quickly finished it up for me. I think I gave this thing like a nice orange paint job to just sort of coincide with the utilitarian of this vehicle at some point here, but this works. However, I'm going to end this episode here because next week I'm going to be part 2 of the major retrofit, and I hope you'll all join me. This is Scott Cook saying, have a good one. We'll see you in space. Bye.